morning, everyone, and welcome back to the first session. And please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Tenzin Doma, currently working as a program coordinator at Tibet House, New Delhi. And good morning and good evening, good afternoon, those who are watching live from Tibet House YouTube and live from Facebook all across the countries. And welcome back to the first session, which is on first immeasurables and eightfold noble path in Pali and Sanskrit Buddhism. Sutra, commentarial sources, study, reflection, and practice. And in this conference, we have brought different topics, and each of two traditions will share so many different things in common, as the earlier inauguration session that all the speakers has already spoken before. And each of these traditions has appreciated in the sense of similarities will be born on only if each side realizes that there is a much more in common than there is differences in two traditions. And also in contrast, in a previous thinking that kept two sides apart, each have much to learn from each other, and also both have long, rich, and living traditions of philosophy as well as practices. With this thought, we will begin with the first session. And for this session, we have our chairperson, Professor Lata Devgarji, Adjunct Professor at Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, Savitribai Phule University, and the speakers, Professor Rana Purushottam, Dean Faculty of Buddhist Studies, Professor and Head of the Department of Buddhist Studies in Nava-Nalinda Mahavira University, Bihar, and Venerable Dr. Tenzin Chiringla, Assistant Professor, Department of Buddhist and Tibetan Studies, Namgyal Institute of Tibetology, affiliated with Sikkim University, Venerable Professor Mireshwati Vimalanana, Department of Buddhist Culture, Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies of University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka, and Venerable Keshilodu Sangbula, Monastic Coordinator of Science for Monks, monk program and Emirate Tibetan Science Initiative. And I would like to request our chairperson and the respective speakers to come up on the dais and take their respective seats, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. And before I proceed to the Professor Lata Devgarji, please allow me to introduce you. Dr. Lata Mahesh Devkar is an academic director of Deshana Institute of Buddhist and Allied Studies and a visiting faculty at the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. She has completed her PhD in 2007 from the Tilak Maharashtra University in Pune. Her topic for PhD was a critical study of the Amara Kosha and its Kamadhenu commentary in Sanskrit and Tibetan. She has received prestigious research fellowships such as, I'm sorry if I mispronounce, Monbusho Research Fellowship from the Japanese government and the Alexander von Humboldt Research Fellowship from Germany. And her main field of research are Sanskrit and Tibetan lexicography and Buddhist Sanskrit literature. Please welcome Professor Lataji.
A very good morning to all of you. Am I audible? Hello. Okay. Hello. Yeah, a very good morning to all of you. Yeah, at the outset, let me express my gratitude to Geshe Dojo Damlu La for giving me this opportunity to chair this session. Normally, I'm used to be on that side of the table, not this side, and this is, I think, my first time, and it comes from Geshe, so it has, yeah, special importance for me, and I'll try to do justice to my duty. So, since this is the first session of this conference on the Noble Eightfold Path and Four Immeasurables, I thought that it's better for me to speak on the basics of these two concepts, which are very important for Buddhism. This Arya Ashtangika Marga or Aryo Ashtangiko Maggo is the road of moral living. It is a path of righteousness. It has 8 constituents that deal with spiritual training, mental development, and moral conduct. As such, it is the final of the 4 noble truths proclaimed by the Buddha. Dukkha, that is suffering, Dukkha Samudaya, arising of suffering, Dukkha Nirodha, cessation of suffering, and Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patipada, the road or the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. As we all know, the Buddha proclaimed his path in his first sermon, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. This is also the middle path, Majjhima Patipada, which arises above the two extremes of addiction to the worldly pleasures, Kama Sukhallikanu Yoga, and addiction to self torment, Atta Kilamethanu Yoga. The path leads to the cessation of suffering. The Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism interprets this phrase Arya Ashtangika Marga not as the Noble Eightfold Path, but Eightfold Path of the spiritually noble. So, as per this interpretation, those who follow the path are noble. As we all know, this path comprises of 8 interconnected practices that are meant to help individuals achieve enlightenment. And these 8 practices are right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. In the Mahachattārisaka Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, Buddha also makes a distinction between the path which appears to be motivated in view of merit and therefore clings to rebirth, and a path which is not intoxicated with any desires and which is transcendental, lokuttara. Here, right concentration leads to perfect insight, sammayana, and to perfect deliverance, samma vimutti. The Eightfold Path is also called the method for the realization of certain conditions which are more sublime than heavenly pleasures, as they culminate in the realization of the emancipation of mind and heart. The path covers one's moral life, sila, power of concentration, samadhi, and understanding of the truth, panya. From these aspects, the 8 constituents of the path fall in 3 categories: right speech, right action, and right mode of living deal with sila, right endeavor, right mindfulness, and right concentration deal with samadhi, and right understanding and right intention lead to insight into the truth. Thus, the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, emphasizes the importance of developing awareness, compassion, and right conduct in order to attain spiritual awakening. The second concept which we are going to deal today is 4 Brahma Viharas, that is loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. These are meditative topics used for the cultivation of shamatha, tranquility. These are taken up as objects of meditation to counter the influence of specific unwholesome states of mind For example, loving kindness counteracts hostility, compassion counters harmfulness, empathetic joy counters dissatisfaction or envy regarding others' achievements, and equanimity counters both the desire and hostility arising from sensuality, as well as the desire to win the approval of others. So, the Noble Eightfold Path provides a roadmap for developing the four immeasurables. For instance, right intention, speech, conduct, livelihood, and effort enhance the cultivation of four immeasurables. By developing right intentions rooted in the desire to promote the well being of all beings and engaging in right speech while abstaining from malicious or hurtful speech, we cultivate loving kindness and empathy towards others. By adopting right conduct in our personal and professional life, we promote compassion and empathetic joy, which leads to equanimity when we interact with others. Right mindfulness helps to cultivate a clear and focused mind, which supports both the Noble Eightfold Path and the four immeasurables in our daily practice. So, this is the gist. Um, Being a lexicographer, I mean, I think I have dealt with these, and these are mere, so to say, for me, it's Noble Eightfold Path, Arya Ashtangika Marga, Arya Atthangika Magga. And this is very, so to say, very simple from a lexicographical point of view. But as we delve into these concepts, then only we realize they are really very deep and very important to cultivate one's mind and to lead on the path to spirituality and to nirvana. So yeah, with this I conclude my few words, and I now invite Professor Purushottam Rana, who started his academic career as an assistant professor in the Department of Buddhist Studies, University of Delhi. After completing MPhil and PhD in the same department from the same university, in September 2010, he was appointed assistant professor in the Department of Pali in Navanalanda Mahavihar, Nalanda. In November 2020, he became full professor in the Department of Buddhist Studies in Navanalanda Mahavihar. Currently, he is Dean of the Faculty of Buddhist Studies and the head of the Department of Buddhist Studies, Navanalanda Mahavihar. In pursuance of his research, he has presented a number of papers in various seminars and conferences held from time to time in India and abroad. He has many published articles and books to his credit. In order to broaden his academic horizon and expand insightful paradigms, Professor Dr. Rana has done a fieldwork at different archaeological sites in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, Pakistan, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, China, and Indonesia. Today, Professor Rana will deal with the Noble Eightfold Path and the concept of limitlessness.
Namo Tiratnaya. Respected chair, venerable sitting on the dais, and learned persons of the dais, my mentor, Gesed Amdullah, Professor Mahesh Devkar, Professor L.P. Singh, Professor Bahulkar, Professor Renuka Singh, the galaxies of scholars sitting in the house, and we are here to deal with Eightfold Path and four immeasurables, and we have to measure within 15 minutes. So it's really a big task for me. Actually, when we see the Buddhist philosophy, the most dynamic philosophy of the world and of the human civilization. How and why I am issuing this statement, the most dynamic philosophy. Immediately after getting enlightenment, the Buddha expressed, he uttered a verse that Yada have patu bhavanti dhamma, atapino jhayato brahmanasya, athasya kankha vapayanti sabba, yatopajanati, the key line, yatopajanati sahetu dhammam. When the nature of the Dhamma is clear to a mendicant, how it is clear? Because he knows the roots of the world, roots of all phenomena, roots of all activities. So, roots of karma, roots of akarma, consciousness, morality and immorality, time and space, and rebirth. All roots are clear to a mendicant. So, when Buddha, at the first moment of his enlightenment, the Shakyamuni discusses about the roots, the so dynamic concept he has introduced to the world. And because of that, the theory of momentariness, the theory of suffering, and theory of non-substantiality appears in the civilizational history. And because of that, it makes Buddhist philosophy very dynamic, because the whole world is a kind of flux. It's not static. And you have to understand the changing nature, the fastest changing nature of the world. And you can't see through the naked eye. You have to inculcate, you have to attain the eye of wisdom. So, and why? Buddha has established so many things here, so dynamic things here. It is clear in Arya Pariyesana Sutta. Arya Pariyesana Sutta, I am just quoting one line, first line. Ekaccho bhikkhave. Ekaccho attana jati dhammo samano, jati dhamme adi navang viditva, ajatang anuttarang yogakhemang nibbanang parivesati. What is the task of a Arya people? First, you consider yourself that you are a born being. And then you have to considering the Adinav, the dangers and the defilements of this process, you have to proceed for the ultimate liberation. This is the aim and objective of your life, aim and objective of the Arya people. That is why the whole exercise has been done by the Buddha and the scholars of the world. So, this is the key statements issued by the Buddha. And then Buddha says that I discusses about two things only. So, from the very beginning of the journey of Buddhist philosophy, the Dhamma, journey of Dhamma, he started talking about the four appamaya. Appamaya, limitlessness, immeasurables. So he says, Dve ime bhikkhave desemi dukkhang cha dukh nirodham. This is alphabet of Buddhism. Dukkhang cha dukh nirodhang cha. You have to identify the suffering and you have to search for the way for removal of suffering. And he has already given the Eightfold Path. And Eightfold Path and immeasurables, this is non-separable. And Eightfold Path is just like a highway, a way. You know the cyber highway? In the same way, there is Dhamma highway. And it starts from the South Pole to North Pole and North Pole to South Pole. And there is discussion about Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana. No. When highway crosses different geographical and spatio gaps, then some changes occurs. When it goes through the group of different type of people, then some new things added, and this is the matter of interpretation and addition of ideas into the dharma, into the dhamma. This is not a separation, this is not creating a separate boundaries, so-called Theravada and Mahayana and Vajrayana like this. This is development of time and space, inspired by time and space. In 5th century AD, in 1st century AD, first, the Nag Sen discusses about Dhammanagar, the righteous city. And it depends on you whether you live in the physical city, material city, or you are living in Dhammanagar. So, I'm just giving you the points, the bullet points, and you authenticate my lecture through the scriptures. Go through the scriptures in Milind Prashna. There is the discussion of Dhammanagar. And now, in 5th century AD, Buddha Ghosh has added new thing. He is talking about the ocean, Sansar. 4 ocean. Jal Sagar, Sansar Sagar, that is different thing. But the two important thing is Naya Sagar and Jnana Sagar. The knowledge of the Buddha is also an ocean, that is Jnana Sagar. And the scripture of the Buddha is also an ocean, that is Naya Sagar. The whole scriptures, this is as deep, more deeper than the ocean. Ocean can, the depth of the ocean can fathom, can measured, but the knowledge cannot be measured, the scriptures cannot be measured until or unless it's a part of your practical life. And making the Dhamma a part of your practical life is very difficult. Here also the two things, very difficult and very easy. It depends on you. This is the therapeutic aspect of, therapeutic beauty of Buddhist philosophy. Friends, now the Buddha has given fourfold methodology. You can apply everywhere. You can apply in social science, material science, and Buddhist sciences. Understanding problem, understanding the roots of the problem, removal of the roots of the problem, and path, the prescription. And the Buddha given this eightfold path, and the first one is Sammaditthi. Sammaditthi is seed of all philosophies. Sarvadrishti prahanaya. When Nagarjuna just proclaimed this sentence, then it says so many things. Sarvadrishti prahanaya. Drishti, false view. Ditti, false view. And the younger generation, Gesela, in his beginning, just in his remark, he was saying, now this is the time of younger generation. You just examine the false views in current theorization in economics, management, statecraft, and in all disciplines. How Ditti false views has made this earth a hell, not a heaven. Because of that, because of false view. So don't understand the Samma Ditti, the first path of two words only, Samma and Ditti. This is as deeper as ocean. And you have to see the implication of Mithya and Samma the struggle between Mithya and Samma in the whole world. And it depends on the new generation to opt whether Samma or Mithya. Initially, I told you how I can measure in 15 minutes. So, these are the, and Samma so, and the second one is Samma Sankappa. I will explain because it's a very fascinating, very romantic topic. Gesela has chosen four immeasurables and eightfold paths. The first one is Samma Sankappo, Nekhamma Sankappo, Avihinsa Sankappo, and Avyapad Sankappo. Again, Nekhamma Sankappo is very deep. The renunciation from the material world, the renunciation from the negative things, so on and so forth. And the last two is Avihinsa and Avyapad. When this is Avihinsa Sankappo, determination for non-violence, and Avyapad, determination for non-harming others, then this is the origin, this is the beginning point of Maitri, Karuna and Maitri. So Maitri and Karuna, these two immeasurables have a great therapeutic value. My students, when they are getting frustrated, I tell them to gain energy, you sit for meditation and you sit for metta bhavana, cultivation for friendliness. And it will give you, this is the experimented truth, you will get a lot of energy in your personality within 10, 15 or 20 minutes. And because of its therapeutic value, in Vipassana meditation, the 11th day is called Metta Day, Maitri Day. Why? Because you have, whatever you have earned, whatever you have learned in last 10 days, through Maitri Day, Metta Day, you can just analyze and extend your merits to the whole world, all being of the world. So this is the beauty of Buddhism. And now some aspects, the seven paths are very deep, profound, and each path I will request Gesela. Of course, Tibet House has made this effort, and Samma Sati, one one day seminar has already been conducted on Samma Sati for introspections, but each and every path of the Eightfold Path requires a whole day. Now the same thing has been discussed under Brahma Vihar and the same in Avidhamma, that is Chetsikas, mental events, or Chetsikas, mental factors. So the same concept travels to different headings, under different headings, in the same context. And the understanding and definition of the same thing is different at different context. So this is the thing, this is the beauty of Buddhist philosophy. which one has to understand, the new generation has to understand. And the another thing is, we should start a study from Theravada, like Eightfold Path, like Immeasurables, and in each and every sects, this is not sect, each and every point of development we can compare from Theravada to Mahayana to Vajrayana to Nichiren to Tendai, all. And you have to conclude whichever, whatever is suitable for the whole world, because the main aim and objective of Buddha is to make the world suffering free. And here, the first verse, Dve me bhikkhave desemi dukkhang cha dukkha nirodhang cha, this is the starting point of Bodhisattva ideal, Bodhisattva view. When he talks, because Sammaditthi is for yourself, but Samma Sankappo for the society, Samma Vayamo for the society and yourself, both. So, the concept of Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva ideal, is for himself and for others also, for the whole world also. So, this is the implication of all these things. And now, before getting second sleep, I conclude my speech, and I salute Gesela for such type of event. And being a dean of Faculty of Buddhist Studies and head of the department, I am saying from this place that Gesell are doing a tremendous service to the Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist studies, and this is the best center in India. Every time I learn from Gesela how to run the department and how to run and how to deal with the philosophy for the modern world, for the contemporary world. Thank you. Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you, Professor Rana, for your excellent talk. And now we move on to the second talk. Venerable Dr. Tenzin Choing. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Buddhist and Tibetan Studies at the Namgyal Institute of Tibetology in Gangtok, Sikkim. Her doctoral research topic is Nagarjuna's philosophy of emptiness and J. Tsongkhapa's exposition, Descent into Prolific Periods. She has teaching and research experience with a range of institutions including University of Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Tibet House, and YMCA. Venerable Dr. Tenzin Choing has numerous publications, and he has also presented papers on themes such as practice of emptiness, a Buddhist approach to inner and world peace, Buddhist psychology, form and substance in Buddhist philosophy, and so forth at national and international conferences and seminars. She is proficient in Tibetan and German and has taught the latter for many years at the University of Delhi and other institutes. Today she will be speaking on Eightfold Noble Paths, Sutra and commentary sources, study, reflection and practice from Mahayana perspective.
Good afternoon to everyone. Am I audible at the back? Okay, thank you. So, at the outset, let me express my gratitude and thank to Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdula and Tibet House for giving me this wonderful opportunity to share my views on one of the core teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, the Eightfold Noble Path, sutras and commentarial sources, study, reflection, and practice from Mahayana perspective. I also would like to thank respected chair, Professor Lata Diokarji, for the kind introduction. Also would like to thank the previous inaugural session esteemed speakers and dignitaries, and also feel very honored to share the dais with esteemed speaker from different traditions, expert in Buddhist studies, Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and other. Okay, so without taking much time, I would like to start with the topic. As I said, the topic for today's talk. Okay, so the topic for today's talk is one of the core teaching of Buddha Shakyamuni, and I think as respected chair already mentioned, and also so well elaborated by Professor Rana Purushottamji, that this Eightfold Noble Path seems to be a very simple teaching, but when we really study it systematically, then there are so many nuances to unfold, not only to see the differences and the commonalities of the two different traditions, but also within one tradition, there are so many different views and so many nuances when it comes to different schools. So therefore, it needs a lot of study and research and exploration. So now, so I'll be presenting the Mahayana perspective. So this Eightfold Noble Path, this, this was taught by Buddha Shakyamuni at different occasions. And one of the occasion was the sutra known as Noble Mahayana Sutra on the rice seedling. In Sanskrit, Arya Salistamba Mahayana Nama Sutra. So in this sutra, as I read, Buddha said, okay, it so happened that Buddha was passing by the rice field and gazing at a rice seedling. He said, Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. And then uh, in the same sutra, you will see there is a discussion and the discourse happening between two. Venerable Shariputra asking question to Arya Maitreya upon what Buddha about what Buddha said in the morning in the passing through a rice field. So then Venerable Shariputra asked the Buddha, asked Arya Maitreya that in the morning Venerable Tathagat said, Bhikshus who sees dependent arising sees dharma. Whoever sees the dharma sees the Buddha. So what is this dependent arising? And then what is dharma? And who is Buddha? So then answering to each of the question, the response given by Arya Maitreya, if you see the entire content of the sutra. So first he discussed what is dependent arising, and he extensively explained the different kinds and the meaning of dependent arising. Then he goes on to explaining what is dharma. So when explaining the dharma, I read the sutra. Arya Maitreya said, the dharma is the eightfold path of the noble ones: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The topic for today's talk. And then he goes on saying, this eightfold noble path of noble ones, combined with the attainment of its results and nirvana, is what the Bhagavan has called the dharma. So here we can say, here we can see that, okay, we are talking about the Eightfold Noble Path, but this is not just the one teaching that you have to study, reflect, and meditate in order to attain enlightenment, but there are many nuances of what we should be practicing when it comes to attaining the two goals, which in the inaugural session, Venerable Geshe Dorji Damdula so rightly pointed out that finally, when it comes to two basic aspiration of not wanting suffering and wanting happiness, we all share this in common. And these two aspiration, in technical terms, we call it nirvana and Buddhahood. So for attaining these two goals, there are so many nuances of the path, and one of the very important aspect of the path, or very important path, is Eightfold Noble Path. Okay, and then the other sutra, just for your reference, it comes in the Dashabhumi Sutra also, where the sutra reads, the Eightfold Noble Path is like this: right view abides in isolation, abides in detachment, abides in cessation, and is meditation directed towards through complete abandonment, and this is applicable to all other seven paths. Okay, so I think the formatting issue. So these are the Eightfold Noble Path: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Due to the paucity of the time, I'll be quickly going through them one by one. Okay, so right view and right thought. So what is right view? So basically these Eightfold Noble Path, they are, when do you attain them? When we talk about the attainment is of these Eightfold Noble Paths, they are attained on the Arya paths. They are attained on the supramundane path. So when we talk about the path to enlightenment, we talk about the five paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing. Okay, just for your reference, if I move on to the slide, uh, here. So in the Heart Sutra, Arya Bhagavati Pragya Paramita Hridaya Sutra, I think most of us are familiar with this mantra. Tayatha Om Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha. So Buddha delineated here five paths that what has to follow in order to fulfill, or in order to attain the two basic aspiration known as the aspiration of fearlessness and the aspiration of infinite happiness, in technical terms nirvana or Buddhahood. And these 5 paths in this mantra are so beautifully encapsulated, which are known as: number 1, path of accumulation; path of preparation; path of seeing; path of meditation; and path of no more learning. So now when it comes to Eightfold Noble Path, when do you attain this Eightfold Noble Path? Then uh, the sources say that they are attained on the Arya path. And when it comes to, okay, the presentation of the two brothers, Arya Asanga and Acharya Vasubandhu, they differ, their versions have slight variations, but one commonality is that they are attained on the supramundane path, means the path of seeing. What is the speciality of this path is that you have seen the ultimate reality directly. You have seen the empty nature of the world directly. So as Kishla was mentioning in the opening remark, that finally we have to fix all the teachings given by Buddha Shakyamuni is to fix 3 things. First of that was fixing the cognitive error. Fixing the cognitive error, which is to see all phenomena as intrinsically real, or seeing all phenomena as objectively real while they are just dependently originated or are empty of intrinsic reality. So now, right, so although these are attained on the Arya path, which starts from the path of seeing, but we can practice them, right? So what is the right view? So right view is defined as the meditative experience of subtler realities, such as the experience of the Four Noble Truths, impermanence, emptiness, and so forth in meditative states. So as I think Rana Purushottamji so well encapsulated in his lecture, that this is extremely profound. This sounds very simple, that okay, we have to gain insight into impermanence, we have to gain insight into Four Noble Truths, but when it comes to the nuances of what is the right view in the sense the subtler realities, the realities which are hidden for us for the time being, and through consistent study, reflection, and meditation, we can explore those reality and meditate on them. So now these realities, this right view, in fact, to study this right view, there are 4 schools, where Bhashika, Sautantrika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika, and within Madhyamika further divisions are there. So what is this right view as explained by Buddha Shakyamuni in staircase to reach the final view, which is the view of emptiness of intrinsic existence? Itself is a huge topic to be studied. Now the next is the right thought. So basically the first one is basically when you get to the nature of the reality in the meditative state. When you meditate on this single pointedly in the meditative state, this is known as right view. Then when you come out of this meditation, and then what you experienced during your meditation, this influences your thoughts, right? So the next is right thought. It says, influenced by the meditative experience of reality, the thoughts enabling one to communicate to others in the post-meditative state. So now what you have meditated in the meditative equipoise, getting to the subtler realities such as emptiness, impermanence, and your thoughts being influenced by that, and then you communicate it to others where through the influence of the right view in the meditative state, that is known as right thought. Next is the right speech and the right action. So right speech and right action basically include abandoning the 7 known virtuous actions of body, speech, and practicing the 7 virtuous actions. So I'm just enlisting them. What are the 7 virtuous actions? No killing, no stealing, and no sexual misconduct. These are 3 of the physical. Then no lying, no harsh speech, no divisive speech, and no idle gossip. 3 of the verbal. So I just quoted one verse from, actually 2 verses from Arya Nagarjuna's Precious Garland Ratnavali, in which he cited the direct results of engaging in these 10 non-virtuous actions. I'll just read it for everyone. By taking life, we will be short-lived. Violence will bring us lots of harm. Through stealing, we will lack possessions. Through adultery or sexual misconduct, we will face rivals. Through speaking falsely, which is lying, we'll face slander. Divisive talk will separate us from our friends. Harsh speech will mean hearing unpleasant words. Gossip will cause our speech to lack nobility. Then right speech, okay, when it comes to, of course, as we are talking about the 2 tradition, Theravada tradition and the Mahayana tradition. So when we talk about the Mahayana tradition or the Bodhisattva path, where the goal is to attain full awakening for the welfare of all sentient beings, great emphasis was laid on the right speech. When it comes to the Bodhisattva path, utmost care is taken on when to speak, what to speak, where to speak, whom to speak, how much to speak. So incorporating your right speech with skillful means is extremely, extremely important to practice when it comes to the Bodhisattva path, a path where you aspire to become fully awakened one, a Buddha, for the benefit of all sentient beings. Next is the right livelihood. So right livelihood is a ways of procuring our requisite, means our livelihood, such as food, shelter, clothing, medicine, that are free from the 5 wrong livelihoods. So what are the 5 wrong livelihoods? One is hinting. So hinting is like, you don't say directly, but you hint the things that you want others to give you. So hinting, number 1. Flattery, where you use some pleasant word with the ulterior motive that the other will give you something. Then the bribery, you use something smaller in order to get something bigger. Then the coercion, where you put other person in a position where they cannot say no and are forced to do something to give you. And then hypocrisy is where you do not have qualities and pretend to have them. So avoiding these 5, and of course many other aspects, or one can, in simple terms, we try to get our livelihood and as much in a very clean way as much as possible. Okay, now next is the right mindfulness. For right mindfulness, which is the 7th one, we should make distinction between introspection and mindfulness. So usually we tend to mix up the two, introspection and mindfulness. Introspection in Tibetan is the station, and mindfulness is timpa. Mindfulness, we know in Sanskrit, is smriti. So what is introspection? As the slide says, awareness which is being vigilant of what your mind is doing, whether or not the focal point is lost due to mental excitement or mental laxity. So basically introspection is a mind. It's just a simple one function of the mind to be vigilant of what your mind is doing. So is your mind is having a right speech, right livelihood, or right action, or your mind has already gone to something wrong? So this is the job of the introspection. It's even most of oftentimes the analogy given is the analogy of the spy. Just as the job of a spy is just to watch what is being happening, likewise the job of the introspection as a mental function is to see what your mind is doing, whether your mind is on the correct object or it has gone to the wrong object. This much is the job of the introspection. But mindfulness is more than that. Sometimes we tend to see mindfulness means just being mindful of what you're doing. But here the mindfulness is extremely, extremely sophisticated. I read, it says, seeks to return the focus of the mind to the intended virtuous objects. So even the Sanskrit word smriti express this meaning. Mindfulness is, okay, now after introspection, once your mind through the introspection has seen what your mind is doing. Let's say your mind has gone to wrong speech, or your mind has gone to the wrong procuring wrong livelihood. Then the job of the mindfulness is to bring the mind back to the virtuous object. So therefore it says intended virtuous object, not any object but a virtuous object. So therefore the role of the mindfulness, sometimes the analogy used is the rope of the mindfulness. So as I've used the picture here, so what is the job of the mindfulness? Through the introspection, you come to know that your mind has wandered off. And then through rope of the mindfulness, you bring the mind back to the intended virtuous objects, such as right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and so forth. Okay, and then these function of the 2 mental factors, introspection and mindfulness, is extremely, extremely important when it comes to the meditative practices also. They eliminate hindrances to meditative concentration, such as mental excitement and laxity. Finally, the eighth noble path is the right concentration. So through right introspection and mindfulness, you have a mind which is very channelized and now can focus on the object. So right concentration is stabilizing the mind, necessary for the first 2 of the Eightfold Noble Paths, which are right view and right thought, namely the right view and the right thought. By means of right concentration, we are able to cultivate the higher knowledges and to focus on the meaning of the subtler views, such as emptiness, Four Noble Truths, single-pointedly. So basically, right concentration through the right mindfulness, your concentration becomes extremely, extremely powerful, and then you can focus on the first 2 noble paths, which is right view and right thought, single-pointedly. Okay, so these are the Eightfold Noble Paths. And now, knowing the nature of the Eightfold Noble Paths, we should know that this is a common practice when it comes to Theravada tradition and the Mahayana tradition. In fact, what makes the difference of the 2 traditions is not just the labels. It's actually the difference in terms of the aspiration, the goals that they are seeking, and the path that they follow, and therefore the object of abandonments of their path. So I've just listed the difference. So Theravada tradition or Theravada path, where, or also called Pratimoksha seeker path, where the motivation is renunciation, to liberate oneself from the grip of samsara, to liberate oneself from the grip of all kinds of fears and suffering. And therefore, the goal becomes the personal liberation or nirvana. And then what you abandon through on this path to attain your nirvana or personal liberation, they are known as afflictive obscurations. These are technical terms I'm just giving for the reference. Afflictive obscuration in Sanskrit known as klesha varan. And then the Mahayana practitioner or the Mahayana path, why it is called Maha? Because the goal is Maha or great, in terms of the goal is to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, not just freeing yourself from the grip of suffering and samsara, but working for the benefit of all sentient beings, taking them to the state of full awakening. So Mahayana practitioner, the motivation is called bodhicitta, which I said. Bodhicitta is a mind which aspires to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. But this bodhicitta can never be there when the renunciation is not there. Why? Because if you do not want to free yourself from the suffering, how can you aspire to make all sentient beings to be freed of suffering? So therefore, renunciation becomes the ground for bodhicitta. And then for bodhicitta to develop, the other part of the theme is four immeasurables. So as Professor Rana Purushottamji so nicely explained four immeasurables today, so that is the another ground for bodhicitta to be cultivated. And then what do you abandon when you follow the Mahayana path? On top of afflictive obscuration, klesha varan, you abandon also the cognitive obscuration known as jnana varan, the obstructions to omniscience. And then, thank you, removing them, you attain Buddhahood or omniscience for the benefit of all sentient beings. Now, I'll just quickly, because the slip is already here, I'll quickly correlate the Eightfold Noble Path with the 5 paths to enlightenment and the 37 factors, 37 harmonious paths to enlightenment, Bodhi, Pakshapati. So this, actually, they seem to be very different, but they are all correlated. So now, as I mentioned, there is a mention of the 37 harmonious path to enlightenment, Bodhipaksha Dharma. So these can be broadly classified under 7 sets, right? 4 mindfulness, 4 absolute abandonments, 4 miraculous feet, 4 powers, 5 strengths, 7 paths of enlightenment, and the last one, if you can see, Eightfold Noble Path. So where do you attain these on the path to enlightenment, which consists of 5 paths? So there is a present, okay, first, just for your reference, what are the 37 harmonious paths to enlightenment? I won't be reading them. So these are the first 3 sets, and then the next 4 sets. Okay, now this 5 paths to enlightenment, where do you attain them? So now, I'm so sorry for the formatting. So now this first is the, okay, so now when it comes to the presentation, where do you attain these 37 factors to enlightenment? The 2 brothers, Arya Asanga and Acharya Vasubandhu, they differ slightly in their presentation. In fact, both of them are known for their contribution to the Abhidharma system, Abhidharma tradition of the Mahayana perspective. And then Arya Asanga, as we all know, is the trailblazer of Chittamatra philosophy, although his own philosophy is the Madhyamika philosophy, which we can confidently say from his writing, which is known as the Commentary on Uttara Tantra Shastra, written by Arya Maitreya, where he explained the Madhyamika view. But when it comes to the legacy that he left for the world, is the Chittamatra philosophy. And then next is the Acharya Vasubandhu, again extremely, extremely important figure from the Nalanda masters, who is also known for his great, great contribution to the Abhidharma tradition. And we all know the text written by him, Abhidharma Ghosh, which is like the encyclopedia of Buddhist psychology, philosophy, epistemology. And it is said that the initial part of his life, he was more expounding Vaibhashika and South Tantrika, which we see from the Abhidharma Ghosha. And in the later part of his life, he expounded Chittamatra philosophy, as we see his text known as Vimshatika, 20 verses, and 30 verses, Trimshika. Okay, so as we can see, so I won't be reading the entire thing. We can just take a note that the Eightfold Noble Path is attained in terms of realization. The true realization come to you on the path of meditation as per Arya Sanga's system. And this system is followed by the higher schools, Chittamatra and the Madhyamika. And then according to Acharya Vasubandhu, you attain the Eightfold Noble Path on path of seeing, which is the start of the Arya path. And this is followed by the two lower school, Vaibhashika and Sautantrika. Okay, now I'll quickly correlate the Eightfold Noble Path with the three higher trainings also. So previous panelists, they mentioned about the Shil, Samadhi and Pragya. All the teachings of the Buddha, they can be so well be categorized under three major categories: the practice of the Shil, practice of the Samadhi, and the practice of the Pragya, in English known as practice of the wisdom, practice of ethics, and practice of concentration. So where do these Eightfold Noble Path fall? Are they totally different things, or they are related? So as I have mentioned here, they are related. So in the practice of the wisdom, so the first two, right view and right intention, it falls into the practice of the wisdom, pragya, and then the right speech, right action, and right livelihood in the practice of the ethics, and then the right mindfulness and right concentration in the practice of concentration. And then as you can see, right effort, this is required. Right effort means finding joy in virtue. So the virtue of cultivating wisdom, virtue of cultivating compassion, virtue of cultivating single pointed concentration. When you find joy in virtue, that is extremely, extremely required for all kinds of practices. Therefore, right effort is something which belongs to all three practices, practice of Shil, Samadhi, Pragya. Okay, and finally the purpose of Four Noble Path comes from many of the sutras given by Buddha Shakyamuni. In fact, his whole endeavor is to help us to attain the two aspiration, which is to remove our suffering and the fears and attain the infinite happiness, which is technically known as Buddhahood. So now in the Wheel of Life, as you can see, he explained the mechanism of the rise of samsara, or the suffering that we all dislike, that how these sufferings or the fears that we dislike, they come into being. Immediate causes the contaminated karmas, which in turn comes from the impure minds such as afflictions. And finally, the worst of the affliction, the worst of the impure mind, or the first of the distorted mind, which is the cause of all kinds of problem, is self-grasping ignorance. Which self-grasping ignorance? Of course, school differ, but according to the highest Buddhist school, the Madhyamika system, Prasangika Madhyamika, this self-grasping ignorance is the ignorance which views all phenomena as objectively real while they exist merely subjectively. Or the self-grasping ignorance is the mind which views all phenomena as truly real while they are mere dreamlike or illusion-like. So now the how Buddha taught that this whole chain can be reversed when you cut the root cause, which is self-grasping ignorance. Because self-grasping ignorance is an ignorance, the antidote should be the wisdom. And which wisdom? Because the self-grasping ignorance, the subtlest of the self-grasping ignorance, which is at the root of all our problem, is the ignorance which views all phenomena as objectively real while they are subjectively real. The wisdom of emptiness, which views all phenomena as empty of objective reality and sees them as merely mentally imputed. That is the wisdom that one has to cultivate in order to cut this root of samsara, in order to reach nirvana. And when driven by the force of bodhicitta and four immeasurables, that can lead us to Buddhahood. Okay, so and finally, let me just take 2 minutes. Finally, I would like to also correlate them, the Eightfold Noble Path, because I'm presenting the Mahayana perspective, Eightfold Noble Path with the 4 branches of Bodhisattva path. So this basically comes from Arya Maitriya's text known as Madhyanta Vibhanga, differentiation of the middle and the extreme. There is one verse which explains that, okay, when it comes to the bodhisattva practices, I mean the practices of those beings who aspires to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, how this Eightfold Noble Path can be correlated. So the verse reads, one that thoroughly realizes, one that makes you understand the 3 factors that make others develop trust as antidotes to those on the opposite side. These are the 8 factors of the path, or Eightfold Noble Path. So how do we correlate? As we can see, I have just extracted the same thing from the verse. First one is one that thoroughly realizes. So the first one, right view. This helps us to thoroughly realize the subtler realities, the nature of the yourself and the world that we live in. And this cuts the ignorance. So this branch is known as branch of affirmation because it affirms the nature of the world and removes the ignorance. Now the second one is one that makes you understand. Now with this right view, then in the post meditative state, through right thought, your thoughts are influenced, and then these thoughts give rise to verbal expressions to benefit others. So it says one that makes you understand. So now the second one, right thought, as a bodhisattva practices, you use that to make these subtler realities be understood by other people as well. So one that makes you understand. Now, the third one is the three factors that make others develop trust. So, right speech, right action, right livelihood. When you comply to the right speech, right view, or sorry, right action, and the right livelihood, this helps others to develop trust in your actions. And then finally, the antidote to those on the opposite side. So, right mindfulness and right concentration, the seventh and the eighth one, they, as I mentioned earlier also, they help us to remove the obstructions to attain the various paths such as concentration, wisdom, bodhicitta, and many other. And then finally, right effort is required for all. So with this, I conclude. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Venerable Dr. Tenzin Choing, for taking an extensive overview of the Mahayana approach towards the Noble Eightfold Path and for immeasurables by quoting from various sources like Asanga, Vasubandhu, and other texts. Thank you very much. So now the next speaker is Venerable Professor Mirisavathe Vimalagnana. He is a professor and head of the Department of Buddhist Culture of the Postgraduate Institute of Pali and Buddhist Studies, Kelaniya, Sri Lanka. He earned his bachelor's and postgraduate degrees from the University of Peradeniya. Since 2006, Venerable Professor Vimal Gnana has served in three universities, including Bhikshu University of Sri Lanka and the University of Peradeniya. He was promoted to professor in 2015. He has written over 40 research papers for local and international journals in Sinhala and English and has authored 2 books. Venerable has presented many research papers for international academic forums in Sinhala, English, and Pali. Today he will be speaking about Brahma Vihara, its practice and efficacy.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Professor Diokar. I would also should thank Dr. Venerable Professor Geshe and organizers for bringing me here and letting me stay in Delhi comfortably. Now today we have learned a lot. Actually, now I'm not a good presenter. Now I also have the ability, the difficulty to talk quickly. Okay, so therefore I don't know whether I'll be able to present everything that I have in my mind, what I have prepared in the presentation. But okay, I give my best. Today I'm talking about Brahma Vihara, how it is practiced and the efficacy of it. And my talk is very much from the, rather than a scholar's point of view, it is very much the practitioner's point of view. How I am a practitioner, although I'm working in a university, we are practitioners. So I'm interested in talking from that perspective. And Professor, as you mentioned, Brahma Viharas are meditative objects, but I should say that at the same time also they also fall within the day-to-day life, because from talking from the Buddhist philosophical perspective, these are dharmas, mental states. So each and every mental state is something that belongs to the day-to-day life, as well as there are dharmas that we can develop up to the level of up to higher levels. So, for example, one good example is Tatra Madhyatata in the Abhidharma. Tatra Madhyatata is concentration. So each and everyone has some amount of concentration at this level. You are listening to me and you have concentration on my talking. So it's general level, but this can be developed to the jhanic level. So then there are different levels of each and every dharma. So Brahma Viharas falls within the fold of day-to-day life and also in the meditative experience. And there is the interesting thing of Brahma Viharas is, I think, this is the social aspect of Buddhism, because now Venerable said that the personal liberation. I think if you profoundly study this Brahma Viharas, we feel that the Brahma Viharas are not for myself. It is totally for others. So the people who practice Brahma Viharas, I mean, this is one of the the significant, most significant teachings in the early in Buddhist tradition. So even in the Theravada tradition. So this these Brahma Viharas are not intended for day-to-day supporting in this general life, but also in the spiritual life up to the enlightenment. So that is why it is highlighted very much in the in the Buddhist tradition. So therefore, it is not just for, I mean, any tradition is not highlighting personal liberation. So it is personal liberation plus the liberation of others. So this is associated with others, life. So okay, so now I have put my presentation, I mean, into 4 categories. So healthy emotions, the most needed, the Brahma Viharas and Appamanya. I'm trying to say something about these 2 words, and the textual elaborations on the pervasion of Appamanya, psychological pervading loving, psychology of pervading loving kindness. I'm not going to talk about, I mean, these are how they are presented in the text. So I'm not going, because in the Pali traditions we don't have the scholars like in the Sanskrit tradition, because in the Sanskrit tradition, scholars in the sense that separate scholars, the people who wrote the commentators actually are representing the tradition rather than their own personal idea. So this is something that we see in Theravada tradition. So we have books, of course, written by people, we know the authors, but they are representing the tradition. So they are not coming under the personal name. But in the Sanskrit tradition, we have authors, they are representing their own view, they are representing the tradition, at the same time they are interpreting the tradition. But in the Theravada tradition, we do not see that. So therefore, I'm trying to show how they are interpreted in the Theravada tradition, in the Pali tradition, rather than in the personal observations of the different authors or scholars, masters. Now when you are talking about emotions, actually some decades ago, emotions are not very much highlighted, because emotions were thought to be antidote to rational thoughts. But today it is a different thing, because we know that in order to treat the human beings actually in a better way, you need emotions. Plus rational views are important, but at the same time, emotions are necessary. So Brahma Viharas are, in a way, they are psychological kind of reactions to the external world. Okay, it's a kind of psychological reactions to the external world, the world outside. So they are, in a way, they are emotions. So emotions are necessary actually. So now when you're talking about the definition of immeasurables is very important. Now this is how it is given. So the first thing is actually real friendliness. Okay, real friendliness. So it is friendly disposition. So metta is friendliness. So it's not for one person. It is sabbe satta. So it's for everyone. So this is how it becomes universal. It's not for just one particular person. It is sabbe satta. When you say sabbe satta, there is no any discrimination. There is no division. Okay, it's myself and others, and also every people. Sabbe not only human beings but also other beings. So it is basically a friendly disposition. It is said in the hita sukha. There are 2 aspects. Hita means friendliness, sukha means comfortableness. So these 2 things are important in when you pervade metta. So one is your friendliness, and also the easy living, the comfortable of the other person, comfortability. The difference between metta and karuna is when you come to the second thing, actually there should be some suffering. When you see suffering, there is a strike of the heart. So you there is a strike, and you are struck by the suffering of the other. So there should be some sort of suffering when you have compassion. So in order for you to generate compassion, some amount of suffering in the of the other person. You see that, or you experience that, and you generate compassion. And in the third case, I think it's the third one, the mudita, altruistic joy, is the most difficult one, because normally it is said even today that I have seen that don't tell your progress to anyone else, because jealousy is there always. So so we hear this. So it's very difficult to be happy seeing the other people's progress. So mudita is, I think, it's a very difficult thing for anyone to generate. So mudita is your happiness. So it is interpret the happiness, seeing others being happy, endowed with good, comfortable, and non-dissolution from the loud is mudita. The fourth one, I think, what makes balance. One of the problems that we have, for example, when you are doing counseling, you are always instructed, don't be overwhelmed by your emotions, when your feelings, when you do counseling, because when the, I mean, if you are innocent, you are innocent person, your heart is sort of honest. Then when you hear the suffering of the other people, when you are put before your suffering of another person, you are struck by that. You feel that you are sort of, you are overwhelmed by the kind of suffering of the other person. But this one, we understand in the fourth, at the fourth level, in relation to the fourth one, we understand that there is a limitation that we can interfere into the other suffering. For example, when my mother passed away in last December, no, she was staying in my avase, in my residence, and I saw what is happening to, I knew that she's going to die within 2 weeks time. But I don't like crying monks. I have seen monks crying. This were not good. That's ugly thing. If a monk is crying for when he sees something, uh, seeing suffering of someone or any other thing, that's ugly thing. Because we must be able to maintain this upekha. So it is said, maintaining an mental equilibrium at the pleasure and the pain, thinking that things become evident due to one's own karma, is upekha. So it's basically highlighted, the karma is highlighted here, the fruition of action is highlighted. So everyone, so some of the suffering cannot be stopped. Death is there, you cannot stop. Suffering is there to some extent, it cannot be stopped to some extent. But still there is a level that we can go, there is a stage that we can reach, but not everything we cannot stop. Okay, so Brahma Vihara and Apamanya is the second thing. Okay, in order to limit my presentation, I would, I'm trying to summarize what I'm going to say, my speech. Brahma Vihara is the old name. Okay, this is found in the early Buddhist text. So Apamanya is not found in the early Buddhist text. Brahma Vihara comes from the two words Brahma and Vihara. Brahma is Brahma, but this is not the creator Brahma in the Pali. But this Brahma is the Brahma lives in the pure. The pure lands, pure abodes, that Brahma worlds. So the people who develop these Brahma four abodes, uh, when they die with that experience, they are, according to tradition, they've been born in the pure abodes called Brahma realms. And these are them, they're very honest, and their thoughts are very pure. So when we practice these Brahma Viharas here, they are as equal as those beings there. So the Brahma here is the Brahma Vihara means maintaining yourself. So when you maintain yourself, okay, Vihara is maintenance. When you maintain yourself according as similar as, okay, in the line of the mental setting of the Brahmas, okay, in the line of the Brahmas mental setting, mental states, that is Brahma Vihara. So that is the word that we find in the old text. But later on, we find this name Apamanya. Apamanya is found in the commentaries and in the Visuddhimagga, written probably in the 5th century, but actually the texts are older than that, but they were written in Pali in the 5th century or 4th century. Apamanya. So the Apamanya is the technical term. These four immeasurables. Actually, the immeasurables come from Apamanya. So Brahma Vihara comes from that idea. In relation to the Brahma idea, but this comes from the pervasion of metta. It can be pervaded to a large number, immeasurable number of beings. So they have given this technical term. The commentators have given this technical term. Abhidharma masters have given this technical term, Apamanya, immeasurables. So immeasurable means there are two things immeasurable, the two meanings of immeasurable. That one thing is that it could be pervaded into many beings. The second meaning is, even in case of one person, there are many contexts. For example, in life, there are many instances in life that you have to generate Mitta, Karuna, Mudita, Pekka, because you have you are as an infant, we are looking at an infant. There are many situations, right? In the same life, there are many situations, many contexts. So even in case of one person, there are many situations. So Apamanya means, if The number if bigger, that is also apamanya, immeasurable. There are also many situations in the same person's life. If you pervade or generate 4 immeasurables in case of one person in many contexts, that is also apamanya. So, okay, now I think that's clear. Okay, in Abhidharma, actually, you know about Abhidharma. I think in the in the Abhidharma tradition, what basically happens is you identify ultimate realities. So each and every mental or physical states are thought to be really existing, dependently existing. So in the Abhidharma traditions, we see this same 4, but the names are a little bit differentiated, because according to them, metta is adosa. So they, in the Abhidharma traditions, they are not called the loving kindness. So metta is not called as metta, it is called adosa. And upekha is basically tatra madhyatata. Because in the Abhidharma tradition, what is important is the Abhidharma masters try to find out the basic elements. So adosa is the fundamental element, psychological element of metta. It can be developed to certain levels, but the beginning point, that is the basic element, is adosa for them. So that is why in the Theravada tradition, the Abhidharma masters has found 170 dharmas. 170 dharmas, not more than that, because they thought that 170 dharmas are the fundamental elements. So there are no more dharmas than that. So in the Abhidharma tradition, adosa is the metta, and the upekka is named as tatra madhyatata. I mentioned this one, tatra madhyatata, but the other two are the same. So karuna is the same. It is called karuna in the Abhidharma tradition, and upekka is what is the other one? Karuna, mudita is also mudita in the Abhidharma tradition. Okay, textual elaboration on pervasion of apamanya. I will read this. But actually, this in the early Buddhist text, you find a very few interpretations, because early Buddhist texts, Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, they do not normally interpret, but the interpretation are found in the commentaries and the text, like Visuddhimagga. Uh, okay, here it is given according to Kathavatu. Normally, each 4 is intended to counteract with another unwholesome mental state. It is given according to Kathavatu: hatred, Vyapada, or Vyapada versus loving kindness. It means kindness, loving kindness, or metta counteracts hatred, Vyapada. Cruelty or torture, that is hingsa, is counteracted by compassion. Dislike, that is arati versus altruistic joy. Now when you have altruistic joy, means actually your happiness about other people's success. So basically this arati, this dislike, is because of your inability to bear the inability to to bear other people's success. So that arati, dislike, is comes up because of that. So when you have mudita, you don't have this kind of conflict between you and the other person. You can bear it. Okay, you are happy with it. And the equanimity, detachment, patigha is the Pali word. Detachment is counteracted by equanimity, upekha. Because you know that when you have upekka, you understand the nature of the life, and then there is a lot of you don't basically, I mean, you don't have this what we call any there is no detachment, of course. The commentary that Attasalini and the Visuddhimagga says equanimity, upekka, is suitable for one who is endowed with desire. So actually upekka has many dimensions. So basically Abhidharma has one definite statement, one definite interpretations, but other texts have different kind of interpretation. Other text might have, which are not Abhidharma text, might have different interpretations, but basically there are slight variations in interpretations. Number B, loving kindness should be cultivated to eradicate hatred. So the same thing is found in the early Buddhist text. I have taken this from early Buddhist text, Majjhima Nikaya, Metta Bhavitabba Vyapada Sapahanaya. All 4 are meditative objects. Now the number C says all 4 are meditative objects and can be cultivated in order to attain trances and liberation. So they can be developed up to the trance level, that is jhanic levels. So it is said that the ability. So it's the first time I come across this situation. This is, I mean, for the first second time. In the first time we come across in the Satipatthana Sutta, whoever develops the mindfulness on so 4 bases of mindfulness: kaya anupassana, vedana anupassana, body vedana, feeling, etc., can reach to the arhant level. In the same way, we find even the person who developed these 4 is able to reach to the anagami level, not arhant level. So I think that is their efficacy. So they are in the day-to-day life, but at the same time, the highest cultivation of them is the level of anagami. So if the person has no grave offenses, grave unwholesome action done, which can give result in the next life, he actually can be a non-returner person. That is not so on, not stream enterer, not sakadagami, once enterer, once returner, but the third level in the path of liberation, that is the anagami level, non-returner. So that is the efficacy, I mean, the highest spiritual level that these 4 measurables can lead you. Okay, so some of the things I don't think I have time to explain. Okay, so I will talk about, yeah, I know. Okay, differences at the level of trances. So I will read this one. Among the subjects of meditation that brings about trances, no, Visuddhimagga is very specific on the efficacy of the trances. It says that if you develop it as a meditative object, this is the level you can reach. The Visuddhimagga says, among the subjects of meditation that bring about trances, the 10 kasinas together with mindfulness of breathing bring all 4 jhanas. Okay, 10 kasinas like Nila Kasita, Pita Kasina, the 4 clay circular slabs that we are using for meditation are called kasinas. So these objects can uh, take you to the 4 jhanic levels. But when you come to these uh, 4 measurables, actually they are limited to some extent because they are psychological. In Theravada tradition, the most powerful meditative objects are the physical objects. For example, breath is the most powerful physical object because breath is wonderfully, I mean, you wonderful experience, physical experience. There is no anything in this world, a physical experience the human or a being can get similar to, I mean, similar to breath. So therefore it is the most, I think, the highest, it has the highest efficacy in bringing you to in the samatha level, in the mental composure. But when it comes to these are much more psychological. But when it comes to the mental concentration, powerful meditative objects are the physical objects. So breath is very powerful, and the kasina objects, that is the clay circular slabs in different colors that we are using in meditation in the Theravada tradition, are also powerful because they are also physical objects. The mental objects in that sense are less powerful. So therefore some of the jhanas, they can take you to the 4th jhana, but the last upekha is powerful to generate the 4th one. That is how it is said. Okay, so these are very important jhanas. So simply I will give you one example. So if you practice, now this is how these meditations, 4 immeasurables, are highlighted in the Theravada traditions. It is said that uh, uh, if you practice 4 immeasurable just for a moment, it is spiritually higher than giving alms 100 days to 100 people, sorry, to 100 people, 100 days in 100 times in one particular day. So this is how it is highlighted. So to have these 4 immeasurable in heart is valuable than giving alms, giving for 100 people 100 times in 100 days. So that is how it is interpreted. So the practice is, you start from me, you can expand it to the other people. That is how it is in the tradition. This is not found in the text, of course. In the practice, in the modern practice, that is how it is practiced. You start from may I be, happy, may I be comfortable, may I be free from worries. So then you start from me and you extend it to the other people, immeasurable number of people, any number of people. So that is metta. So I don't think that's, I think that's enough, because I have taken my time. So maybe we can talk in our discussion session, question and answer session, things more. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Venerable Professor Vimalagnana, for your very illuminating talk on the four Brahma Viharas, their practice and efficacy, and I'm sure that will be helpful for those who want to practice these four immeasurables, not just gain understanding of the textual knowledge. Thank you very much. So now I invite the last speaker of this session, Venerable Geshe Lodoi Sangpo. Since 1992, Venerable Geshe Lodoi Sangpo has been studying Buddhist philosophy at Gaden Jangse Monastery and was able to attain Geshe Larampa degree in 2018. He did his 1 year study of Tantric philosophy at Gyoto Monastery in 2019. In addition to this, he started learning science in 2006 and got the opportunity to study at Emory University for 3 years. After completing his study at Emory University, he has been serving as a science teacher and coordinator of Gaden Jangse Science Center for many years. Presently, he is serving as a supervisor of Unit B, Thukdam Project, and monastic coordinator of Science for Monks program and Emory Tibetan Science Initiative. Today, Venerable Geshe Lodoi Sangpo will be speaking on the relevance of practicing Eightfold Noble Paths and Four Immeasurables in modern times.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I want to express my gratitude to Gishila and the staffs organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity to represent Tibetan Buddhist, sort of community, Sanskrit-based Buddhist. And I'm thinking, the Anila gave a wonderful presentation and covered most of the things that I wanted to cover. And at the end of the her presentation, I felt like she gave presentation on my behalf. Anyway, uh, I have come up with some lists of the sutras and their commentaries, where you can find the highlights on the eightfold noble paths and the four immeasurables, and the sutras of 10 bhumis, and Buddha Avantam Sanka Sutra, and Samdhin Nirmochana Sutra, and the Sublime Continue, and Letter to a Friend by Nagarjuna, Differentiating the Middle from the Extreme by Arya Sangha, and Ornament of the Sutra, Abhidhamma Samukaya, and so on, and so many. And these are some sort of, few examples. Then I thought maybe I should give an example how these eight noble fold paths are presented and highlighted in Mahayana tradition. And of course, there are so much, sort of, lengthy discourse on this topic, and I will try to come up with some example, but most of them are already covered in Tenzin Chiang's presentation. And the one, maybe, I do a little bit highlight on this in the sublime, the differentiating middle from the extreme, the branch, the noble eightfold paths are categorized in some sort of four branches, and the branch that thoroughly cuts off, the branch that brings understanding, the branch that generates trust or confidence in others, the branch that serve as an antidote. The branch that thoroughly cuts off, So here specifically refers to these noble eightfold paths, what to say, the attributes or the characteristics or the mental qualities of the ayas, those who has, highly progressed in their spiritual journey. And the right view from in this context, it specifically refers to the attributes of these ayas and spiritual practitioners. And right view, by definition, the reason why this one is regarded as the branch that thoroughly cuts off is because uh, at the path of the seeing, having a clear and correct understanding of the object. The object could be the 16 aspects or attributes of the Four Noble Truths, or it could be interdependence or whatever, and having a clear and correct understanding and able to carry on this sort of correct understanding into their post-meditative period or the what we call the subsequent attainments, and also at the same time and cutting off all the negative afflictions that are need to be abandoned by the path of the seeing and undecisive, unwavering, and so on. And because of that, this one is regarded, the right view is regarded as the branch that thoroughly cuts off. And right view also, I think, in many commentaries presented it being the foundation and also some sort of the noble path, the real sort of noble path, because the others are some kind of the right view also presented in another sutras and commentaries like the right views and other noble eight paths as a, the right view is as the eye, and then the other rest of the seven noble paths are the the feet when you see. And then when the right view is just kind of seeing the truth, the depth nature of the reality, and then just to seeing the things and then moving toward that, as served by the the feet, is something like the other seven uh, noble at seven the noble paths. And then right thought, here specifically it refers to in alignment with the right view, understanding, having proper understanding on nature of the reality or the 16 attributes of the noble truth, and then also having some sort of intention or the motivation and to teach that to other people so that they can also enjoy the their realization, enjoy the realization, and enjoy the journey of the spirituality and so on. And then the branch that generates trust in other, the right speech and right action, right livelihood. I will not, define what is the right speech and what is the right action, right livelihood. But for examples, not telling lie, and the harsh, not divisive, using not divisive, speech and harsh, and then gossiping and all these things. And right action would be just refraining, doing unwholesome actions, killing, and then right livelihood is pretty much what Anila presented, avoiding five wrong livelihoods and so on. So basically these are regarded as the branch that generate trust in other, because these are more sort of physical expression, the behavior sort of the gestures, and then the behavior, gestures and expressions actually are the indication, sort of the indication of spiritual realization. We can understand or we can feel the vibe or the aura that brings by the the highly spiritual and practitioners. For example, His Holiness Dalai Lama, in his presence we can feel the compassion and we can feel the caring and all these things. And similarly, these sort of right speech, right action, right livelihood plays some sort of important role in terms of other people's, gaining trust for their for the practitioners, the sincere and rigorous journey in terms of practicing these paths and so on. Then the branch that serve as antidote, right effort and right mindfulness, right absorbed concentration, and right effort actually channeling all the physical and mental resources into developing and spiritual into developing spiritual journey, rather than kind of developing some sort of outside uh, um, uh, resources, or the the reputation, or the whatever kind of the uh, out the outwardly sort of focused sort of fames and all these things. And then the right mindfulness and the right I will not speak about this because she has already covered. And then I will try to little bit on this one, presenting 8 noble paths with analogy to the Dharma wheel. I think this is quite common in both traditions, in Theravada traditions and in the Mahayana tradition or Sanskrit-based traditions. And then these 8 noble paths are kind of subsumed in 3 trainings. And in regarding to the the wheel, in terms of analogy, and the right speech, right actions, and right livelihoods at the navel of the wheel. And then the right view and right thoughts are spokes of the wheel, and the rim of the wheel, right mindfulness and right right concentrations are the the rim of the wheel. And presented in that way, the navel, the right speech and action and livelihoods is some kind of base that holds everything together, which is the kind of Vinaya sort of Buddhist discipline, ethical conducts. And the spokes and the right view and right thoughts are the spokes of the view, because they are the one that directly challenging against the opposing force of the negative emotions, such like misunderstanding or misconceptions and wrong views. And then the right thought is more kind of oriented on focusing on others' well-being, and giving some kind of spiritual generosity of generosity, such as teachings and teaching right views and all these things. And then the right mindfulness concentration is the rim of the will, because in Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, generally we talk about the 2 different types of meditation, and then the shamatha meditation, and then the analytical meditation. Shamatha meditation is kind of focusing on one single object, and actually uh, inwardly converging all the scattered thoughts into one kind of focus. And in that way it strengthens mental capacity, and also increases the mental stability. And because of that, it is kind of it puts in analogy of the rim of the wheel. And that is the yeah, something that, yeah, I think I have pretty much covered these things. And then this one, I think another illustration given in the Buddhist commentaries in regarding with the 8 noble paths. And it says very kind of rough translation. The point what here is making what point the point what is making here is that uh, when we have a pure and refreshing and smooth texture of the water, when it goes into a different vessels, vessels of having different sort of elements, saltiness and all these things, because of that the taste changes. It gives many different type of flavors. And similarly to that, when the Eightfold Paths, uh, the taste of the Eightfold Paths varies in corresponds to the different mental capacities of the the individuals. And so this one, uh, I personally, like this, stanza. The reason why I like this stanza is because uh, in the most of the texts, when they give highlights on the right, highlights and the presentations on the Eight Noble Paths, usually they talk these being the attributes of the Aryas and kind of attributes of the those who have gone through the spiritually high sort of progressive status. But in these stanza or verse speaks about some sort of the um, some sort of a noble path varies in their degree, in terms of we as the individual, someone who is the ordinary being, we also do have this kind of seeds, or maybe a little bit partially, little bit partial of these kind of Eight Noble Paths. And because of that, we can clearly see the connection and the relevance of these Eight Noble Paths in our own sort of status. And I think that is very important, and to have some kind of relevance, to have some sort of connection and relevance of this practice in our day-to-day life. And of course, the maybe we of course, we do not have the very highly advanced sort of this noble ed path, but we can practice some degree of it, and that degree of practice can truly shape our mental attitude and mind streams and or ways of perceiving things. And because of that, the way how we behave and the way how we interact with other people, it can change, it can truly shape on different levels of our interactions. And I think that is quite important. And then I will talk a little bit on for immeasurables presented in sutras and their commentaries. Sutras, the source that I have come up with here, the least, White Lotus Sutra and Mahaparinivrana Sutras, a letter to a friend by Nagarjuna, Abhidhamma Samukhaya, and then the list goes on and on. And the four immeasurables, I will say these concept and this practice is most sort of practice sort of Buddhist concept in Tibetan community and in Tibetan Buddhist community, because in every day we recite these words, stanza, Simje Tumje Dewa the Devi Chuda Dembachi Dunga the Dunga Jinda Dunga Maybe Dewa the Medevach Niri Chanan in the Tavidanyam. It is not these recitations not done by only the sanghas, only not the monks, but every lay Tibetan peoples, they do recite these sort of standards in every morning on daily basis. And because of that, I think this is most well known and most practiced sort of concept and spiritual elements in Tibetan Buddhist community. And then at the same time, when you recite these stanzas, of course you are supposed to contemplate on these concepts on more kind of deeper level. And this is some sort of very condensed sort of stanza that really, if you really think a little bit deeper or dive into the deeper sort of this contains carried by stated by these stanzas, actually it captures the whole Four Noble Truths. You see, the Simjantanja Dewa the Devi Juda Dembich, the cause of this happiness and the happiness itself. What are the cause and the cause of the suffering, and then what is the suffering itself. And then this is pretty much the law of the causality. We talk about this one in the Four Noble Truths. And then the appreciative joy, empathic joy. And then the equanimity, the empathic joy. Actually, empathic joy is not just rejoicing other people's success, their happiness, but also aspire them to be in that joyness and to be in that sort of success. And then the equanimity, I will speak that part a little bit. Okay, I think I don't have much time for that. Okay, then I think these stanza beautifully captures the way how actually practice these four sort of measurable things regarding with the equanimity, loving kindness, and then the compassion. And this stanza puts in some sort of metaphorical ways, and the equanimity itself being the field, and then the loving kindness as a moisture, and then the compassion is the kind of the seed, and then and through this practice grows into the tree of the true altruism. And this one beautifully captures the sequence, or the uh, 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 the equanimity being the base, and then the loving kindness and the compassion and all these things. uh, I, if I have time, I can maybe a little bit elaborate on this, but okay, I will not go through much detail of on this. And then I will the equanimity and loving kindness, compassion, and the sympathetic joy, the here I come up with the list, the near enemy, far enemy, or whatever, or what kind of the equanimity overcomes it's sort of it is being the antidote, and what's kind of the negative opposing factors for that. Indifference and equanimity is, as I said before, it's not just seeing everyone equal or not, but also at the same time having sense of aspiration to attain uh, all living beings, not trapped in the tensions of too much attachment, and not and then the other sides of the negative force, the anger and frustration, hatred, and all these things. And then loving kindness, yes, and compassion. I will maybe speak a little bit on compassion, maybe just 1 minute, so then that's all. And compassion, when His Holiness Dalai Lama speaks about the compassion, and he's himself is the truly embodiment of these positive mental qualities. And he will say that the compassion is not luxury, but it is necessary. And he also put these positive mental qualities in analogy to the water, and then the ingredients of the the tea that we have. And the religious elements are some kind of the ingredients of the tea, and then the compassion is some kind of the basic needed sort of necessary sort of on our survival. And another one reason to support this statement, His Holiness Dalai Lama will say that the compassion, if we look into the biological system and based on the scientific findings, we will see that uh, when someone is going through too much sort of the stress and anxiety and depression, then there is some sort of negative impact on physiological uh, health and process. And that clearly means biologically these negative emotions are not suitable or compatible with our biological system. But when we do some kind of cultivate these compassions in infinite sort of um, scale, it really boosts our own immune system, and it doesn't harm it doesn't harm or it brings any kind of damage to our physical body. That that itself is telling us something, that these compassion and positive mental qualities are some kind of deeply ingrained in our sort of biological and system, and in our blood. And because of that, there is a foundation, and there is some kind of seed, compassion within us, and then there is a hope for that. And yeah, this is pretty much, this is pretty much, I wanted to say. And thank you so much. And thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Geshe Ludo Sangpola, for the excellent speech. And now, do we have time for question and answers, Geshe-la? Okay. Sorry, I think we are running behind the schedule for almost 1 hour. So now there is no time for question and answers. But I hope that those who have questions to all the speakers, they can discuss during the lunch break. And thank you once again, Geshe-la and the entire team of the Tibet House for giving me this opportunity. I thank all the presenters for making wonderful presentations, and thank you, learned audience, for their patience listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Professor Lata Devkarji, and to all the speakers. And now I would like to request Professor Baulkarji to kindly do the honor of presenting the souvenirs to the chairperson and the speakers, please. Professor Lata Devkarji. Professor Rana Purushottamji. Venerable Dr. Tenzin Chwingla. Venerable Professor Mireshwati Vimala Nana. Venerable Geshe-la Sangla. Thank you, Professor Baulkarji. And now we will recess for the lunch break, and we will resume at 2:30. And the next session, which is on Eightfold Noble Path in Buddhist and Pali tradition, textual sources and practice, and my colleague Ms. Kamasujala will be moderating. Before that, I would like to request this to all the speakers and the speakers already on the dais to kindly come up on the dais and take pictures, a group picture with among us. Thank you.
It's a very beautiful good one. I really like it.
Thank you.